Hello students, and welcome to this video over part 2 of chapter 14 of Living with Art by Mark Getline, with me, your host, William Wright. Today I'm covering part 2 of chapter 14, and for some reason these slides are not pulled up. Let me pull those up real quick and then we'll get started. In any case, part 2 is going to cover, we're going to start with the Aegean. I covered most of our history. I gave way too many prefaces in the first one, so I need to just dive right in. But in any case, we got through all the way from prehistory to ancient Egypt, and now we're going to dive into the Aegean. And what is the Aegean? Well, the Aegean Sea is the ocean between what is now modern day Greece and Turkey, right? So Asia Minor and the Bulgar Peninsula. I think that's what they call it. In any case, it's Greece and Mesopotamia, or Greece and Asia Minor. Mesopotamia is over here. What we just talked about, Syria, Iraq, all the Fertile Crescent, all that stuff is over here to the east. We're moving westward into a piece of the Mediterranean. Egypt is down here. We covered that. But in any case, yes, the Aegean is this little piece of ocean between the two peninsula, Greece, Asia Minor. Again, I'm trying to remember the word for that peninsula, but in any case, the cultures that start to take shape in the Aegean are the beginning of our understanding of civilized cultures around Greece and this part of the Mediterranean. So we're going to start with the Cycladic, the Minoan, and the Mycenaeans. Okay, so we're going to move pretty quick. Cycladic, mostly we're going to move quick because we don't know a ton about these. These are not cultures that had a particular writing system just yet. So we have a few pieces of their artwork. They're mostly island people, so there's not a ton, and they were limited in their scope. But we do know that the Cycladic era, which takes us from the Bronze Age to the early, I guess it's all the way through the Bronze Age. Yeah, because we haven't started quite the Iron Age here. But in any case, 33 to 2000 BCE. The Cycladic era, we see these geometric breakdowns. They're sort of abstractions of figures, and it's actually something you might recognize as, it's kind of called back to when we get to Cubism and some later movements, of the 20th century. But we know that these simplified figures they tie back to a specific culture, and that's kind of the main artwork that we know. It's the Cycladic Islands. We know they were seafaring people, and they had this particular image. We know that from there, from the Cycladic Isles south of there, the island of Crete, and the city of Knossos, the palace of Knossos, or I guess Knossos, is developed by a society known as the Minoans, and the Minoans were known for their bull-oriented art, and they would actually have these sometimes sort of condescended towards sort of rituals around actual dancing with bulls and nude figures, and it was always sort of exotic and tribal in nature. But they would do all these stunts, and their art reflected this veneration of the bull and the rituals around the bull. And it's partially because their origin story, it actually traces back to their original royal, the founding royals were the offspring of a bull and a human, right? And so this led to actually a specific Greek or kind of Mediterranean myth around a specific character. And I'm giving you time so you can maybe figure out, have that aha moment. The Minoans and their half human predecessors. This gave rise to the myth of the Minotaur, which is a man with the head of a bull, and the stories that come from there. But yeah, this is all based on the Minoans. And I think that their worship is actually encapsulated for a few hundred years, even after this, in the Mithra religion. I'm not an expert on that. But in any case, from there, like I said, we're moving quickly through the Aegean. We also have the Mycenaeans, who built hill forts, walled cities along. This is actually getting onto the mainland, the actual peninsula here. Mycenae is on this small peninsula of Greece. It's not an isle, it's actually on the mainland. But in any case, they have these walled cities, they have a lot of decoration, and they're actually really well known for their gold. Now, Croesus, I believe, is one of their kings, or actually he was king of Lydia, another kingdom, and I think actually that was further south. But in any case, the Lydians invent gold coinage, but it's the Mycenaeans who really, I'm trying to check here, see if there's a anywhere on the marker, Lydia. I think it comes later. But in any case, Mycenaeans develop their gold working techniques, their ability to hammer and shape gold and create cups and things out of gold and into a specific culture related to them. It's also highlighted in their really good grave goods traditions, right? So the Mycenaeans build tombs that are little corbelled beehive domes. We've looked at this treasury of Atreus before. It's actually a monolithic, this is a monolithic lintel. It's actually a post and lintel, stuck into the side of a corbelled dome, and that creates the entrance to this tomb where lots and lots of cool golden grave goods were stored. But in any case, from the Mycenaeans, like I said, we went through the Aegean really quick. The Mycenaeans apparently sort of at around this time, around 1100, as we transfer from Mycenaean, culture being sort of the epicenter of the Aegean world, we actually, number one, what happens, as I understand it, we think there is a little bit of a like Greco Dark Age that happens because a people group that was most likely the Phoenicians, who were also a seafaring people, probably we know that somebody came from the sea and conquered a lot of Greek colonies, pre-Greek colonies, proto-Greek cultures. So we know that that area takes a hit, and then eventually they fight it off after a couple hundred years. If you haven't figured out, I'm transitioning to talking about Greece. After a couple hundred years, we start to see the city-states of Greece take more shape, and they start to create alliances, and we start to see the culture of broader Greece and the Greek Empire developing. And part of that, we're going to look at this timeline. Like I said, the collapse of Mycenaean dominance comes as somebody attacks from the sea. And then when Greece comes back, it is highly developed. Actually, one of the things that we're not so sure of is possibly if the Phoenicians in their potentially Phoenicians in their fighting and defeating of Mycenaean dominance, if in doing this they might have introduced some more advanced technologies, including the early alphabet. So this is where we start to see outside of Mesopotamia and Egypt, on like the European continent, we're starting to see alphabets develop and written language. And it's tempting to say that it's phonics, right? Because that's the Greek word for like alphabets and language and stuff. But in the Phoenicians and phonics, right? That sounds right. But phonics has to do with sound. That's just a interesting irony. But in any case, we know that the Phoenicians most likely brought some of this culture. In any case, if it was truly exclusively the Phoenicians that came in. In any case, we start to see in chronological order this development of Greek culture. So the early geometric styles, they're very simple. We start to see the focus on athletics. We start to see Homer and the kind of Odysseys in the Iliad develop. In any case, we see the development of Greek culture, Orientalizing. So basically, that Orientalizing, I don't really love that word. It means other, essentially. It's not really about connection to Asia or anything like that. It just means other. And basically, I think the time of 700 to 600 BC is when Greece starts to have a broader worldview, right? They start to see outside of themselves. And in any case, then we get to Archaic, early Classical, all the way through the Classical, and then into the final era of Hellenistic, as Greece recedes and becomes a province of Rome. But anyway, let's talk through these. Oh yeah, and it's the Archaic period. That's when you get the Persian War, the Spartans and all that cool stuff kind of teaming up with the other Greek city-states. In any case, the early geometric period, we start to see vessels develop that are highly decorated. We see a hearkening back to the Cycladic cultures, right? This sort of geometric abstraction of the human figure. As this develops, as geometric Greek art develops, they become the first known people to speculate on the nature and purpose of art. Basically, what is art? And especially, I guess it's probably important to note this is what we know of, and this is in Europe. They're the first people to ask, why do we do this, right? Is it for entertainment? Is it for always for spirituality? What is this for? So, right, they start to talk about sculpture, painting, and architecture as techne, which is the origin of technique. It basically means things that require special bodies of knowledge or skill. And the idea is, it's encapsulated in our use of technology and technique today. But in any case, yeah, we know there were some spiritual uses of art, but overall they were starting to question, like, what is art? Is it for entertainment? Is it for growth? What is it? Then we get to the archaic period, which sees a little bit, again, a little bit more anatomical understanding of the human body, because as we close the geometric period and move into the archaic, we have seen the first Olympic Games. We start to understand that the Greeks are studying the human body, but we also obviously see some connection back to the Egyptian art. We know there's some broader connection being made between Greece and other parts of the world here. As we move to the archaic period, we know the Egyptian sculpture has influence on Greek. In any case, we see this even more developed as Kouros developed, which is basically Greek for youth or boy, or kore means maiden or girl. Kouros and kore are basically little action figures, right? They're sculptures of human figures, just generic nude hues produced during the archaic period of Greek civilization. Basically, we start to see it's like a return to amulets and fetishes, but maybe with less of a spiritual context, more of, again, understanding of anatomical study of the human body. And then furthermore, in the archaic period, we start to see a really iconic set of styles develop, and it's typically around their amphora, which are a type of vessel used for a lot of trading. They fill it with oil, they fill it with olives, then they can put some sort of hide cap on it and tie it under this, and then it's easy to carry a load. It's basically, these are like early like goods crates, but in doing them, they also have the amphora that they use in their home, the vessels they use in their home, and they start to decorate these um in ways. You can read the description of what an amphora is exactly. These handles are really particular, and there's always this large body that allows them to decorate in ways that tell stories, again, much like in the geometric period. But we start to see red figure and black figure, which is basically they use special techniques where they essentially smoke the pottery. They reduce it. There's introduction of carbon to it, and they protect the plain red clay in certain areas, and then the areas that aren't protected turn black, right? And they figure out two different ways of doing it. They have black figure style where the background was protected and has turned red, or they have the red figure style where the figures themselves are protected and then the background is actually turned black. But in any case, we start to see stories, and one of the common motifs we can again continue to see is more and more study of the human figure, right? And specifically around athletic events and exercise, right? Like I said, we saw our first Olympics, so we have discus, we have wrestling, we have javelin, we have all sorts of running races, we have different kind of understandings of the human body. And actually, I think it's worth noting that this is also the beginning of what we know as a gymnasium. So actually having a culture, again, as far as we know, it's like the earliest culture that's like about fitness and physicality. Actually, gymnasium is the original word for a place to train naked. And then eventually we changed it to just mean place to train, place to exercise. And then we abbreviated it to the gym in the 19th century. But in any case, yeah, we see this real focus on the physical body, right? I've also heard that the Greeks and Romans are like some of the first people to start talk about me, my feelings. And there's just this, like, in a way, I guess, like they begin to turn it on themselves and reflect a little more. In any case, the side effect we see of that in Greek art is the development of sculpture and drawing that become really amazing, right? They're really naturalistic and really accurate in their depiction. Now, in the classical period, the early classical period, we see, yeah, the beginning of kind of proportions being studied. We see the beginning of sculpture with that classic. One of the 5 things you need to know that Mr. Wright wants you to know from this class: a contrapposto, right? The sort of tilted hips, right? That are allowing these figures to look more natural, right? They're not so rigid like those Koros or like that sculpture of Menkar. These guys, they turn their heads, they twist their shoulders, they twist their hips, they move their arms, their legs. All of this starts to develop in the Greek classical period. So they're studying the human figure, as well as in the classical period, we start to see some serious study of architecture, right? So yeah, General Pericles becomes head of state in the 5th century BC, and he begins to rebuild the destroyed Acropolis. Yeah, the Acropolis, which was the original city on the hill in Athens. It has fallen to disrepair. Pericles gets Phidias to oversee rebuilding the architecture and sculpture of the city on the hill at the Acropolis. This is when we see the development of Colosseums and the Parthenon, right, and the Temple of Nike we looked at in the architecture chapter. But in any case, this is what the Acropolis looks like now. And looking at the Parthenon, remember the pediment or the frieze at the top has become a sculpture that we really look at. There's a slide for it in a minute. In any case, the Parthenon, it's a load-bearing structure inside of post and lintel columns, right? We see Doric columns that have some really sophisticated architectural development. One of the things that Greeks started to figure out is how to make things look perfect rather than necessarily be perfect. They knew that tall columns would appear to bend inward at the center, so columns on the Parthenon were given a slight bulge known as entasis. They knew the long horizontal porch would look like it sagged in the middle. So they actually made it rise 2.5 inches in the center, right? After that long side. The large buildings perpendicular to the ground look like they lean forward. So to avoid this, they actually tilted the facade back. And the corner columns would have looked thinner than inside columns. So they made them actually physically bigger, right? It's just an amazing level of understanding of visual effects versus architectural. Yeah, that we see here in the Parthenon. An amazing, preserved-ish building from the first millennia Greece. We know that at the time that it was built, again, that pediment up there was fully colored, and it had interior hallways, and again, it had a roof over it. It had a load-bearing structure that you could walk around inside that was colored and decorated and told stories of Greek history and Greek myths. And actually inside of it, the main chamber had a 30-foot tall ivory and gold statue of Athena atop a pedestal. This was actually made by Phidias. We have a replica of it, a small model, and there's, of course, lots of copies. This is just a model copy. And actually, one thing that's pretty fun is they have a Parthenon that was rebuilt in Nashville that you can go visit and actually see a replica of the 30-foot tall statue of Athena. So pretty weird and out there. I'd like to go visit that. But in any case, oh yeah, some of the pieces of the pediment from the Parthenon are actually housed. I got to see these. That's pretty amazing. Even if they're incomplete, it's wild to see these. And also understand that they used to be fully colored with blues and turquoise and reds. And in any case, they're a little over life size. They're housed in the British Museum. This is pieces of the top of the Parthenon. In any case, as we move to the Hellenistic period, the last phase of Greek art, as Greek culture spreads east through Asia Minor, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, lands get conquered by Alexander the Great. He reaches all the way into India. Actually, he moves across Afghanistan, although he has a lot of trouble the further east he gets. And by the time he gets to India, the elephants and the big things and sickness and problems that he's having among his commanders lead to his death in 323. In any case, some of the classical, like Hellenistic period sculptures we see again highlight the human nude, the human anatomy. This is where the Aphrodite of Milos, or the Venus de Milo, is created. This famous piece that doesn't have its arms. If you go to the slides on the class and watch this YouTube video, it's a silly commercial that tells you the story of how it lost its arms. I usually show it in class, but I'll leave it to you to look up. In any case, yeah, so the Hellenistic era just sees dramatic, overwrought, very accurately and naturalistically depicted human figure. The Roman copy of the Laocoon group is here, but it was actually, we know that it was built out of bronze in its original Greek status. This is a stone version. But in any case, we see there's vessels, there's ribs underneath the skin, there's abdomen, there's just it's pretty wild. There's still some hierarchy of scale going on, but we see just the height of Greek sculptural prowess, I guess. In any case, transitioning from the Greek era, let's talk about Rome. So in the year 510 BC E is when we usually see, we think of the beginning of Rome. It is a city on 7 hills. It's a series of 7 different cities, technically. They have influence from the Etruscans. They have influence from Greece and the wider Mediterranean. But yeah, the Roman Republic is founded actually in 510 BCE. Before 510, they had kings. It did not go well. They were very corrupt and typical like tribal kingdoms. But in any case, they develop the Republic in 510 BC. Rome comes of age during the Hellenistic period, that last period of Greek culture. And then in 27 BC, Augustus takes the title of Caesar and Rome officially becomes an empire. Now, again, let's highlight. So Alexander the Great is born in 356, dies at 323. He ascends to the Macedonian throne in 336 at the age of 20, begins conquering the world eastward, right? That's Alexander the Great's great legacy, is that he moves from Greece through Asia Minor, folds in Egypt, and even moves all the way, like I said, across Mesopotamia, Persia, into parts of India and the Eurasian steppe. Now, after his death, for the next 300 years, Egypt was ruled by a Greek dynasty. And in this, the Greeks basically encompass and grow. This is part of when the Greeks become such a massive powerhouse, because they combine with the prowess of Egypt, and they adopt Egyptian religions, although they preserve the Greek language. And like I said, the Macedonia actually extends all the way eastward. But in any case, it's really important that Egypt is such an integral part of Greece, because Egypt then gets absorbed as the 300 years after Alexander dies. As that time goes, Rome begins to take power. The Republic of Rome begins to take power over Greece. It absorbs Greece and then actually conquers Egypt. Octavian conquers Egypt, the future Emperor Augustus, and he defeats Mark Antony and Queen Cleopatra, and he absorbs not only Egypt, but also by this time they've absorbed Greece. In any case, that's why we see Rome, this small city, extends, all the way through Italy, and then it begins by absorbing Greece and its, holdings in Asia Minor, and then goes south and even conquers and grabs Egypt. Now, they never go as far east as Alexander does, but Rome will eventually move all the way to the west, pretty much as far as you can go. They never get to Ireland, but they get to Scotland. The Romans see basically like our first glimpse of Northern Europe, the Celts, the Germans, and people like that, which we'll get to at a later chapter. But in any case, they get through Spain, they conquer North Africa. There are North African emperors that are African and Syrian in descent. All right, it's an interesting span of time that Rome basically exists, because it's the founding of like some of the modern world as we know it. In any case, yeah, at its greatest extent, you see it here. This is under Trajan in 116 AD or CE. In any case, as far as the art goes, Rome continues to develop. It basically just absorbs all the artistic culture of Greece. It's very naturalistic. It's very accurate. It actually takes the accuracy to a next level and starts to sculpt. This is like interesting that it's a new idea, but it's not just a sculpture of a human, but a sculpture of a particular human. Right. So they sculpt Augustus. They sculpt Marcus Aurelius. They sculpt this. I think this is a statue of a baker and his wife. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, and it's I don't know. In any case, they start to see, in Rome, there's actually some early ideals that we like even espouse still today in America around like regular people being able to get change their station in life and move up. And in any case, it's espoused in their artwork. When regular people begin to have artwork made of them. This video here, I'm actually going to put this one on the classroom. You should watch it if you have 20 minutes, another 20 minutes after this long lesson to watch. It's a quick abbreviation of the history of Rome, and I like to show it in class, and then I can zoom through these slides a little faster. But in any case, if you have a chance to watch it, you should. It's very enjoyable. I like to start out by talking about, we've already talked about Rome and its extent and all that stuff, but I want to talk about, in terms of city and specific art in Rome. I want to talk about the city of Pompeii first. So Pompeii is a bustling commercial, agriculture, and resort town built in the foothills of Mount Vesuvius. In 62 CE, so that's AD, the area was hit by an earthquake. Pompeii did recover and rebuild. They did not get the hint sent by the earthquake. And in 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupts, coats the whole city in ash and lava, and destroys it. For all intents and purposes, the city of Pompeii is destroyed. It disappears actually after a time. People forget that it even existed, and it's just considered to be mythical or ancient in some way. There's a movie with Kit Harington that's pretty cheesy about Pompeii. But in any case, Pompeii was rediscovered in 1592, but they were like, oh, there's this cool town in lava. I wonder what that is. And then they left it behind, and it wasn't until 1748 they were like, oh, it's Pompeii, cool, like this ancient city, right? And so they began this like systemic program of excavating in the middle 19th century. They dig through and uncover what's left of Pompeii. And we actually literally, I mean, there's people that are like running away from the lava and get hit by it, boom, and they're just preserved perfectly, or the cloud of ash, I should say, probably. Lava might be a bit reductive. But in any case, we see literally people, their bodies cool off the lava so fast it turns to solid rock as it hits them, and right, so they're like fossilized. It's pretty awesome. The preserves, obviously, it would have sucked if you were the one running from the lava. But in any case, after this excavation, we see the town of Pompeii, the city of Pompeii is uncovered. We find regulated city streets. We find the Forum. We find the town square, which I'll talk about in a minute. We find a modern Roman city. It has an amphitheater. It has all the good stuff. Now, in talking about what it means to be a Roman city, it's often talked about that the Romans invented the city, right? I don't know if that's entirely true in and of itself, but one of the things I like to point out is that the town square, or what typically is like the center of a town in Western civilization, begins to be set up by the Romans. So what that looks like is, number one, a forum, which is a public square or market place in ancient Roman cities. It's this space, basically like a farmer's market. It's an open forum for the public. It's a town square. It's where the stuff happens. It's where the goods are traded and the culture is exchanged, right? At the town squares in most Roman cities, there would have been a temple of Jupiter, right? We think about now, there's typically in a lot of Western civilization, there's a church or a temple or some sort of cultural center at the town square, typically speaking. And I'm talking about that's cultural in nature, because the third thing that most Roman cities had was a basilica, which is basically the ancient form of the courthouse. This is the public building for assemblies, rectangular in plan with an entrance usually in one side. And then in Pompeii, it housed the law courts and official offices. Now, this is where Senate met. This is where city governance happens in the basilica. Now, it is interesting because later on, when Catholic cities are developing across Europe, they adopt that term for basilica, and they adopt the structure of the building for their cathedrals, right? So the basilica is actually, they combine the basilica and the temple, in Catholicism, and it becomes like a part of the town square. But in any case, that's later on. But yes, so these are three basic parts of a Roman city. And they're a part of Pompeii. We see city streets, and I want to highlight here one of the things that we see. Obviously, this is a lot of stone, but one of the things that we see highlighted in Pompeii is the use of concrete. Early uses of concrete are one of those things that, as I said in the architecture chapter, make Rome Rome. The ability to develop and build things quickly and soundly, even if concrete wasn't as nice and developed as it is now, it was important. Here we see a city street with even like a crosswalk, which it always is amazing to me that that's basically what crosswalks look like now. I think these were for horses and carts and things to get through, but at the end of the day, they look. That's the same way things look now. You could step across the city and not, or step across the road and not step in the poop and things that happen when you have horses running your vehicles. Another thing here that you might see is with the concrete, they also had running water systems, which was an important part again of what made Rome Rome, is moving water, which of course ties back to aqueducts, but just in general, yeah, sewage and clean water was an important piece of Roman culture. We can see the kitchens in Pompeii, and the kilns they would have used for their goods and their pottery. We see the amphitheater in Pompeii, which is basically just a word for a double theater. I don't know if you saw it in the Acropolis, but there was a regular Greek theater, which is just half of one of these. But when they put it together, they call it an amphitheater. It's a Roman structure, which is two Greek theaters put together with a central arena, right? So all the action happens on the side, and the viewers can sit on either side. Literally, arena, I think it means sand. But in any case, yeah, it's a sand pit in the middle. All of us have seen Gladiator. You know what this is like, but we'll talk about the Colosseum later. But yeah, the amphitheater in Pompeii was actually the site of a pretty cool occurrence in 1972. Pink Floyd made this DVD. I've actually seen it. It's worth your time. If you this link just goes to the trailer, but check it out if you have time. It's a great movie. We know that in the Colosseum in Pompeii, they had the typical gladiatorial fights. They had events like concerts and things like that. Yeah, it is definitely, indicative of what Roman culture was like at the time. They had it's like the theater, right? It's the entertaining center. They also had, this is revolutionary, bathrooms. They had toilets, right? They had toilets where, now they're very public, but it's better than just, going around the corner all the time. They had toilets that had fast moving water that would take the dirty water out and move clean water in. We actually see a artistic depiction here. Now, what you don't really want to know about is the fact that this is what they used, a sponge on a stick for toilet paper. That's why they needed clean water moving in so fast. I don't even want to get into all that, but hey, it's better than what they were doing before, using their hand. Right. Now, yeah, so sewage is an important part of it. We also see the frescoes in the city of Pompeii show us what life was like, what the purpose of some of these buildings are. The biggest excavated brothel here, it has illustrated menus over the doors of the city. We get to see, what they were getting up to, right? In these preserved frescoes. There's also frescoes in the more lavish homes, the more decorative frescoes about animals and sea life and just all kinds of again things that either were pretty or about Roman life that were kind of again indicative of what life was like for them. There are baths in most homes. Again, you could fill up with clean water and clean up regularly. Again, there are kind of modern sleeping arrangements. One of the brothels, the bedrooms there were like made of stone, but they did have cushioned beds, cushioned bedrooms. They had, again, like modern kitchens. When you can see there again the pottery and goods that were used in those environments. Dining halls for big meetings and like cultural dinners and things like this, decadence in general, gardens inside most of the homes or inside a lot of the structures. And again, yeah, just in general, beautiful artworks have been preserved, and some of them we have really great restoration that shows us the brilliance and color and just the cultural growth of Rome as we see it in Pompeii. Now, in any case, that gets us through Pompeii, and I want to reiterate in closing, talking about Rome, closing in part, talking about Rome, the things that made Rome Rome. Romans were widely given credit for the use of the arch. We talked about that in the architecture center or architecture chapter, but the Romans really highly developed it. They developed the vault, they developed the dome, they do all this stuff. So don't forget that the arch is a part of this. The vaulted ceiling is basically an arched hallway. The dome is an arch that spins on an axis. And then this led to, of course, aqueducts. Now, aqueducts and bridges, things could be built that are, large monumental structures that they don't have to make out of solid stone. The arch can support things built above it without having to be solid. So pretty amazing. Now, their aqueducts were constructed, and all of this, allowed for them to have the sewer system. And what, of course, material, again, as a reminder, this was made possible by their excellent use of concrete, their ability to roll into a new area and within a few weeks have fortifications, have aqueducts, have bridges. This is one of the things that helped them conquer so much land. And we see a lot of their architectural feats, espoused, especially in the Colosseum, which has partially degraded, but it's mostly preserved in a way that you can see these huge, many-story walls, held up by arched gateways and entrances. It's not unlike most sports complexes you see now. It actually had catacombs and things underneath it that allowed actors and animal keepers and things to move around underneath and set up situations on the arena above. It also apparently could be filled up with water, and you could have naval battles. It's pretty amazing. And then the aqueduct system, the catacomb would become an aqueduct system and move the water out, right? They could fill it and then they could empty it. It's just amazing, right? This was built in 72 CE. This is getting close to the peak of Roman power. And in closing Rome, what we need to know, we're going to come back to Rome later when we talk about more of the path of Western civilization. But at the end of the day, Rome was a multicultural powerhouse of the turn from BC to AD. They were the greatest empire up until that point that the world had ever seen. And not only did they conquer these lands, but they didn't just go through and just like burn and kill. Now, they did plenty of that. But they also absorbed a lot of these cultures and spread their culture to them, for better or for worse. And, a lot of times it was done through propaganda, calling the Northern Europeans drunks and barbarians. They came up with the term barbarian for the people whose, words they didn't really understand. But in any case, they would give citizenship, at least to a certain extent, to most of the people that they conquered. And this allowed for lots of upward mobility. You could change the station you were born into, and Rome is the first culture that allows this, really, at least as far as we know. And one of the epitomes that we see of this is this sarcophagus of Artemidorus, a man with a Greek name who lived in 2nd century CE Egypt. When he died, he was a Roman citizen. It's a Greek name, and he's buried with Egyptian accoutrement. Egyptian decoration. So he's a great espousal of the multicultural world of the Romans. There's also in the video, if you go back and watch that video, you can also learn about the baker who's sold bread outside the Colosseum and built a baking empire after just being a regular baker. And he I don't know. It's worth watching that video to hear about that and just hear about upward mobility and the multicultural world of the Romans. Now, I don't want to be the guy who just says like great things about Rome and the spread of Western civilization. They also did plenty of questionable things, but it's worth exploring. The multicultural nature of it. In any case, I hope you enjoyed that discussion of Rome. Again, we'll get back to it and we'll talk about the downsides of Rome and the movement away. One thing to note right from the get-go is that the Republic falls apart as soon as it becomes an empire with an emperor. When he names himself Caesar, it gets rid of a lot of the more modern ideas of the Republic and all that. In any case, we'll get to that later. It's in the video too, but right now I'm going to go ahead and end this. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of chapter 14, and I'll see you again soon.